darnos por vencidos, renunciar a la revolución, renunciar al socialismo, rendirnos.
Fidel Castro was the world's longest-serving dictator. Although the United States often tried to get rid of him, in the end, Fidel Castro outlasted 9 American presidents. He was a constant irritant to them, a communist leader right on their doorstep. Castro was determined to overthrow the American-backed Batista regime, which happily profited from the corruption and gross inequality of a haven for the playboy rich, dominated by organized crime. So Castro and his band of revolutionaries masterminded a classic guerrilla campaign from their mountain base.
On January the 2nd, 1959, the rebel army entered Havana.
Castro had triumphed, Batista had fled, and Cuba had a new government, with the legendary Che Guevara among its members. Its promise to give the land back to the people and defend the rights of the poor. Soon afterwards, Castro went to America, saying he wanted to be friends with his powerful neighbor, but he felt rejected when President Eisenhower wouldn't see him. Snubbed by the Americans, Castro claimed he was driven into the arms of the Soviet Union and its leader, Nikita Khrushchev. Cuba had now become a Cold War battleground. April 1961, the Bay of Pigs. This was America's doomed attempt to topple Castro by recruiting a private army of Cuban exiles to invade the island. But the young revolutionary was more than a match for them. Under his command, Cuban troops repulsed the invaders, killing many and capturing 1,000.
The evidence is incontrovertible.
A year later, the stakes were far higher. American reconnaissance planes discovered Soviet missiles on their way to sites in Cuba. The world was suddenly staring into the abyss of all-out nuclear war.
Unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island.
The superpowers stood eyeball to eyeball, but it was Khrushchev who blinked first, pulling his missiles out of Cuba in return for a secret withdrawal of US weapons from Turkey. Castro, though, had become America's enemy number 1. The CIA frequently tried to assassinate him, most infamously with a cigar packed with explosives. Other schemes were even more bizarre.
This was a bright idea, that if we got a certain powder to him, if he put it on, this would his beard would fall out and the Cuban people would all fall over laughing and he would be ridiculed.
But while America plotted, the Soviet Union poured money into Cuba. It bought the bulk of the island's sugar harvest, and Russian ships crammed into Havana harbor, bringing in desperately needed goods to beat the American blockade. But when Soviet communism collapsed, so too did Cuba's economy. The little island faced economic collapse. Tempers grew shorter as the food queues grew longer. By the mid-90s, many Cubans had had enough. Thousands took to the sea in a waterborne exodus to Florida. It was a crushing vote of no confidence in Fidel Castro. And the Florida exiles became the focus of a vigorous campaign to undermine Castro's regime. Still, Castro could be proud of some of his achievements. High-quality medical care, freely available for all. Literacy rates matching leading industrialized countries. But in 2006, Fidel Castro was forced by illness to hand power to his younger brother Raul. He initiated a program of reforms without undoing all his brother's work. Out of power and increasingly frail, Fidel Castro was seen only rarely. This was January 2014. Later that year, the United States and Cuba made their biggest move towards a permanent thaw, hoping to draw a line under the past. But Fidel Castro remained a huge figure of the 20th century, and the Fidel effect will fade only slowly. While many Cubans undoubtedly detested Fidel Castro, others genuinely loved him. They saw him as a David who could stand up to the Goliath of America, who successfully spat in the Yankee eye. For them, Castro was Cuba, and Cuba was Castro. James Robbins, BBC News.